The 24-year-old man accused of stabbing acclaimed author Salman Rushdie pleads not guilty to attempted murder and assault. Russia is accused of using Europe's largest nuclear plant as cover to launch its attacks as shelling claims more lives in Ukraine.
More ships depart Ukraine's Black Sea ports loaded with vital food supplies.
A gunman leaves 8 Israelis injured after opening fire near one of the holiest sites in Jerusalem. This is the man accused of stabbing acclaimed author Salman Rushdie on Friday, leaving him in a critical condition. 24-year-old Hadi Matar, a US citizen with Lebanese parents, entered a not guilty plea as he appeared at court charged with attempted murder and assault. Matar is said to have stabbed 75-year-old Rushdie more than 10 times in the face, neck and stomach as the writer spoke at an event in New York State. Rushdie, who authored his controversial book The Satanic Verses in 1988, is recovering in hospital after the attack. He faced years of death threats for his work, which some Muslims see as blasphemous due to its depictions of the Prophet Muhammad. News of the stabbing has been met by praise by some people in Iran, where in 1989 the country's then leader issued a decree calling for the killing of Rushdie in exchange for a $3 million reward.
It was Salman Rushdie's 4th book, The Satanic Verses, which changed his life. The reaction to the postmodern surrealist novel forced the 40-year-old to go into hiding for nearly 10 years when it was published in 1988. Some Muslims around the world considered the publication to be blasphemous, and on February the 14th, 1989, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khomeini issued his fatwa calling on the British American citizen's execution and offered a reward of €3 million. However, the author continued writing despite the threat, hoping that the bounty on his head would eventually be lifted.
It's clear that they must cancel.
Iran must rescind the fatwa. That is the least we can demand. I ask the EU countries to push for this. Rushdie only began to emerge from his life on the run in the late 1990s after Iran said it wouldn't support his assassination. He became an advocate of freedom of speech whilst living in New York. Rushdie saw his works rewarded despite the fatwa.
In recent years, I've been somewhat deflected from, if you like, a literary conversation. And one of the great pleasures of the Moore's Last Sigh, anyway, of its publication around the world, has been the return of that interest in my literary work. And this is, I must say, is one of the great moments of that.
30 years after The Satanic Verses was published, the 75-year-old had just announced the publication of his 15th novel when he was stabbed during a conference in the state of New York.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is accusing Russia of cynically using the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant as cover to launch its attacks. The leader spoke amid fresh calls to demilitarize Europe's largest nuclear power station, which is occupied by Russian troops in eastern Ukraine. Speaking last night, he said the occupiers are trying to intimidate people in an extremely cynical way, using the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. They actually cover themselves with the station to fire at Nikopol and Maganets. They arranged constant provocations with the shelling of the territory of the nuclear power plant and try to drive their additional forces in this direction to blackmail our state and the entire free world even more. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry announced its troops had gained full control over Pisky, a village in the Donetsk region, but Ukraine denies this claim. Fighting continues near Kramatorsk, a key industrial city held by Ukrainian forces also in the Donetsk, where heavy shelling killed at least 3 people and injured 15 others this weekend. Ukraine is hoping to recapture the southern city of Kherson, which Russia took in the early days of the war, And they say they've destroyed a strategic bridge in their counter-offensive operation against Russian troops.
Ukraine's Ministry of Infrastructure says more ships are leaving its Black Sea ports loaded with vital grain supplies. A Barbados-flagged cargo ship and a Marshall Island flag bulk carrier are the latest to leave the war-torn country. In these two ships alone, 14,500 tons of agricultural products have been exported, according to Kyiv. The ships will pass through Turkey, where a joint operations centre has been established by the UN, alongside representatives from Ukraine, Russia and Turkey, to check all shipments. After a series of negotiations, Russia lifted its blockade of Ukraine's ports in July to allow only food shipments. It brings the total number of ships to depart the country under this UN-brokered deal to 16.
A clean-up operation and an investigation are underway after thousands of fish have been washed up dead on the Oder River running through Germany and Poland. It's unclear what's causing the fish to die, but authorities suspect chemical poisoning. I see the animals dying before my eyes. I know that the fishermen will lose their livelihood, that the visitors to our national park who want to experience its wildlife will be gone in a few years. Maybe there'll be tourists curious to see the catastrophe. The river is Poland's second largest, and there are warnings of an environmental disaster, which officials say could take years to rectify. Residents are being urged to stay away from the water. Poland's Prime Minister visited the site. Dear compatriots, my commitment is not only to find and punish the guilty ones, but also to minimise these losses as soon as possible and restore the original state of the Oder River. And I believe that it will be possible in a short time. According to some reports, fishermen have been hauling out dead fish for weeks. Environmental groups have criticised Poland's government for its slowness to react to reports of contamination in July.
A gunman left 8 Israelis injured in a suspected terror attack near the Western Wall in Jerusalem's Old City. 2 victims, including a pregnant woman, are in a serious condition in hospital after a man believed to be a Palestinian attacked a bus near the holy site in Israel. The shooting comes amid renewed violence between Israel and Palestinians.
A bus full passenger, and I just stopped in the station of the grave of David, tomb of David. In this moment, start the shooting. 2 people outside I see for him, 2 inside was bleeding.
Authorities are still investigating the attack, which happened on Sunday. This is the moment Taliban officials fired gunshots into the air to disperse a rare women's protest in Afghanistan's capital of Kabul. Chanting bread, work and freedom, around 40 women marched in front of the Education Ministry on Saturday, just days before the Taliban marks its first year in power. Strict laws regulate women's rights in the country, with limits on their ability to work and have an education, as well as restrictions on travelling alone. Some protesters were reportedly beaten by Taliban fighters who intervened to break up the demonstration.
Thousands of people protesting in the South Korean capital Seoul on Saturday. They braved rainy weather to call on the government to suspend its hostile policy towards North Korea and China. Demonstrators also demanded that Seoul suspend its military cooperation with the United States and instead push for a peace treaty and cooperation with Pyongyang. A SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket taking off from the Vandenberg Space Force Base in California on Friday. It was carrying the latest batch of the company's Starlink satellites, which will be part of a network providing internet services to people around the world. The 46 spacecraft will join the nearly 2,500 satellites already in service.